welcome to our second day for the Prism Award celebration, everyone. We are so excited to have you with us. Thanks for hanging in there with our slight delay getting started this morning. We are so happy to have you, and we're so happy to have our amazing panelists here today. Oh, there we go. Now we know we're streaming. All right. So with no further ado, I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves and get started talking about the amazing forum of Anthology for queer comics. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much. Hi, I am Malachi Lily. I use they, them pronouns. I am an agender, Philadelphia-based illustrator, poet, curator, and energy worker. I'm probably the rookie of the crew, and I'm so excited to meet all these amazing comic artists and illustrators that I wish I could just meet in person and connect with and learn so much more from, but I'm happy that we have this technology to connect. I'm looking forward to chatting with all of you.
Hello, my name is Netta. I am an illustrator, kids lit, author, gamer, a whole lot of art-related things. I am so excited for this panel and just the experience of working with everybody and reading things and getting to know people through their art. It's been such an amazing experience. Definitely looking forward to the feedback we go over and seeing how things go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Viktor Kerney. I am a writer and a Xanadu enthusiast. Can never say that word. I'm really excited to be a part of this, just to see everyone, but also to have a good conversation. So I'm glad to be here.
Hello, I'm Andrew Wheeler. My pronouns are he, him. I am a comic book writer whose works include Canadian queer superhero Freelance and the feminist fantasy series Another Castle. But I'm here in my capacity as the editor of the Shout Out Anthology, which is a collection of stories by an incredible spectrum of queer creators telling the kind of stories we wish we'd be able to grow up with as kids.
Hi, my name's Tab Kimpton, pronouns he, him. I'm the co-editor of Come Together, a European anthology of erotic comics, which is one of the finalists for the anthology category this year, along with Alex Hassan, my co-editor. It's just wonderful to be here, and thank you so much to all these judges who read to us stuff,
Well, welcome everyone. And I guess just to sort of get us started today, what is it that drew each of you either to judge for the category of anthology or to create comics in the form of an anthology? What is it about that form that allowed you to do what you wanted to do or sparked your interest in a way that you enjoy?
I think, go ahead, Netta.
Okay, thank you. I would say for me, anthology is always something that if you look at it from the outside, it seems like a giant mountain to overcome. And I feel like that's always going to be something you're going to find the most interesting things if you take the time to read through, because there's so much diversity, there's so many different ideas, there's so much talent coming together into one area. And I feel like I always find some of the best gems when it comes from a group effort. So that was something I was really excited to look through.
Yeah, I think being a judge for the anthology section, it's kind of like speed dating. I feel like I got to know so many different artists and writers through that process. If it was one of the single story narrative comics, you spent a long time with one story, but I got to meet so many characters and know so many perspectives. And that's really beautiful. I'm someone who really loves connection and seeing these different styles and different stories. I'm like, oh, I could see myself collaborating with this person. Oh, I want to see more from this person, and just getting a variety of views, because we can, especially now in quarantine, you know, be in these little bubbles and be in the bubbles of just our most micro communities. So this was an opportunity to connect with as many artists and people and writers as possible. And I loved every minute of it.
Same. I would say that it's nice to see what other artists and other creators are doing, but it's also a learning process. You get to see how others really put stories together, how they tell their stories, and it's really exciting for me. And I love anthologies because, again, it's a big journey, because you're going into something knowing there's going to be tons of different ways of explaining it, going through it, and the art and the writing and what have you. There's so much that you get from it. So I was excited to judge, all the work, but also really see the talent and learn from the talent.
For me, I used to be a journalist, a comics journalist, and one of the responsibilities that I took on for myself in that role was that I wanted to be an advocate for giving people the opportunity to find their voices and to fight for an industry that was not gatekeeping queer voices out of comics. And so when Stephen Andrews, the publisher of TO Comics, the published Shout Out, came to me and said, "Would you like to edit an anthology for us?" That was the thing that was at the forefront of my mind, was that I want to be using my position to lift other people up. And an anthology gives you that power. So in many cases, we were giving writers and artists their very first opportunity to produce a published comics work, or we were giving people the opportunity to be in a book for the first time, or to share stories that they'd never been able to tell before. That's the wonder of an anthology to me. That you have no excuse not to really use that platform to sort of cross-pollinate, to let people discover each other and different ideas and different voices and different creators.
Quick question following that, Andrew. Was Shout Out your first editor of an anthology? So I know Toronto Comics has done a fair number of anthologies before. So was it your first?
It was my first time editing an anthology, yes. Yeah. I mean, I had been editor-in-chief of Comics Alliance prior to that, so I had editorial experience, but yeah, as an editor, this was my first time. And I was very lucky to have BC Holmes and Joe McGill as my fellow editors, my deputies on board. So Joe Met especially has done a tremendous amount of anthology work in the past. And Stephen Andrews has now published, I think, seven or eight anthologies. So the publisher has had a very good grounding.
Oh, nice. Come Together was my first one, and it made me do another one, Bite the Bug and all of that. But Come Together came about. I've been self-publishing webcomics and doing Kickstarters for about one a year for a very long time, about 7 or 8 now. And I'm reaching, I'm not that old, but I'm reaching the limitations of what my body can do as a creator. I find I can't actually produce as much artwork as I used to anymore, just because of physical sort of restrictions and RSI. So it was looking into what I could do now as a person. And one thing I'm very good at is packing boxes and doing spreadsheets and all that stuff that a lot of artists absolutely hate.
God bless you.
I will answer emails my entire day and just love every second of it, but make me actually sit down and draw. I'm like, oh no, that's hard, because hacking a book and sending it out, I can get that right. There's a yes, no, did it get sent that day? Yes, brilliant, it's there. Oh, it got lost in the post, I'll send you a new one. But with art, it's so, there's no right answer. It's exhausting. And I think I need that to, like, the admin stuff to break up all of the creative work. So I got into it as more of a, well, someone's got to do this admin, so it might as well be me. I can talk a bit more about, so I'm really interested, so I'm mainly talking about Shout Out as well, because Andrew's the other finalist in this, about sort of themes and why the anthology started in the first place. Come Together, I'm based in the UK, so it was about I did have plans at some point to do a UK-based erotica anthology, and then the stuff with Brexit happened, and my national pride just went gone. I was like, so the idea of doing like a pro-European thing sounded like a really fun thing, because sometimes it does feel like all of the cool comic stuff is happening over in America and Canada. Just something to talk about the sort of talents that can come out of there as well. Yeah, so that's what got us started on that one.
Why erotic?
Why erotica? I've got I've got the spiel I learned when writing the Kickstarter, which is a very nice answer. I can pop that one out. It's because porn is always political when you get marginalised people involved. So you might as well go full throttle into it. And I think erotica is about connection. And I think it does feel sometimes that you're doing preaching to the choir. I don't, that people are already picking up this book are probably going to be pro-immigration or things like that. But anything you can do, it just felt so powerless with all of this going on. And it's still going on sort of 3 years later. We're still, don't know how much you keep up with UK politics, because there's enough politics happening where everyone else is from right now. But we're still trying to leave the EU in some level of shambles. So it was like, what can you do as small creators to try and fight against this division that seems to just be happening all over? And I think intimate connection is as important to that as friendship and that. And I think it's in my other work, I do more erotic stuff. Obviously, we're like a PG-13, all ages thing. But I think we've had a number of years of people stepping away from erotica and sexuality stuff when tied in with like LGBT issues, because of the it's not about sex, it's not about sex. But sometimes it is about sex, and it is about the connections that we make with other people through that. And that's why I'm drawn to erotica as a general form.
I found it interesting what you said, that you felt so many things were happening in other places, because from an American standpoint, I always felt like so many things are happening over across the pond, or another place that I always feel like they always have something going on. I want to say it's Brazil. So it's always seeing things going on. I'm like, oh my God, they have so much going on there. I want to be a part of it. But to hear that about us, it's like such an eye-opener from the perspectives people have.
Yeah, because a little bit of a segue, but Shout Out actually has Dante, I should know this, who's actually Dante and H. Puyo. They did a short story in Shout Out as well, and they're in next anthology. There's a big Brazilian comics theme going on, and it reminds me a little bit of the French scene, actually. But I think they've got such historical comics for sort of asterisks and things like that, that they've managed to get away from that comics are for kids thing. That I think definitely, at least in England and maybe America, definitely has. So I've just assumed Malachi, Netta, and Viktor, you're American. Yes, you're all in America right now. And Andrew, you're in Toronto?
I am, but I'm British by birth.
Okay, yeah. Bath.
Sorry? By birth, not Bath.
By birth, or you're from Bath. Yes.
I'm from Hastings, not Bath.
Hastings, all right, cool. It's quite nice to get out of the way.
So here's a question for our judges. Seeing as that many of our editors are, have connections to a European or outside of the United States culture, which, I think a lot of times we forget as Americans how much of a mixing pot we are. As judges, do you feel like, is this the new British invasion? What is it? Do you think there's anything culturally related to the anthologies that spoke out to you this year as a committee?
Definitely a lot of the settings didn't seem very American. I feel like a lot of American comics are always like New York City, California, somewhere in a city, whereas a lot of these comics I noticed had more of a flower field, countryside, tavern-esque kind of feel. And I actually appreciated that because it was different. And that's what I meant earlier when I said you can find so many unique things in anthologies. So it's like having that in there was like, this is really good. I like the characters, I like the plot, I like the setting. It just gave more to the overall stories.
I agree with that. I think that's the neat thing about it. As I was saying, like you're going on a journey. You're going different places, and when you think about erotica, it happens in so many different places. It's not just bad within the big cities. It's on the floor. It's in the barn. It's all over the place. And it's those moments that you really, really connect with when it happens. So I love the fact that we were able to go different places, that we were able to kind of take your mind in different spots and areas and even challenge your own thoughts. So I kind of enjoyed that.
I have to admit, I was not really as honing into the fact that it was like European or not. I was focused more on the fact that these anthologies held within them like a diversity of voices, a diversity of people, of bodies, of forms, of perspectives within the anthologies. And so perhaps like in focusing on a European, broadening your scope, you were able to get more voices, more unique stories, more of a diversity of people, of lovers, of narratives. And that's really what I was focused on and what felt important to me. Like, I didn't want to see an anthology where everyone was white and like everyone was able-bodied and everyone was cisgendered, I didn't want that at all. And so I feel like your two anthologies and the Sylvan anthology really had a broad range of many different types of people and experiences, and some not just people. I'm very much attached to creature-esque, humanoid, shape-shifting, interdimensional, and there's a lot of like creature things happening as well, lots of fantasy happening as well, and I think that fantasy and imagination is directly connected to the queer experience, as we have to imagine our own bodies a lot, imagine who we are, and create ourselves, recreate ourselves even after birth. So I thought that I really honed into the imaginative spaces more than like, what nation is this from? That wasn't as relevant to me.
There's what you said reminded me, there's a lovely story in Shout Out, which is about this sort of interdimensional blob that asks a name of a person. I don't know if you recall that one reading through. And that was one that really stood out to me, and the person doesn't have a name, because sort of in trans communities, sort of like naming oneself is such a powerful thing. And it's interesting when you combine that with fairy tales and things. And very sweet, the story has that person actually asking the name of this sort of eminence of light. Yeah, it's really nice, creative look at it. Yeah.
That story is the Name of the Forest by Day Irwin and Killian Ng, who actually are both based here in Toronto, which a lot of our creators are, well, actually, we have a probably more Toronto creator than from anywhere else in the book. But I would say it's far from a majority, and we were very lucky in being able to bring in people from all around the world. But as you were saying, Malachi, it's not necessarily about the place they're from, but the voices that they could bring to the book. That was what we were looking for. In some cases, those things do intersect. We have a two-spirit story, so you would only get that from someone from that community. That was tremendously important to be able to include that coming from a Canadian publisher. But in many cases, the stories being about diverse locations and being set in diverse places is just a reflection of the fact that queer is universal, that all of our identities exist everywhere in the world, you know. So to embrace that and represent that accurately means that you have to have an international voice within whatever parameters you've set for yourself as a book.
That's really interesting. Andrew, did you have an open call for shout out, or did you more approach artists? Yeah.
There were very few people that we sort of reached out to directly, and in those cases it was just sort of get some people who we knew that could be sort of anchors for the book. For the most part, yes, it was an open call, and people with absolutely no published work were encouraged to submit it so that we could have those voices in there as well. We didn't want to add another gatekeeper to a community that has too many gatekeepers.
Yes, we did an open call as well. I have to admit, submissions day is one of the worst and best days of putting together an anthology. Just going through and choosing and giving feedback, because we gave people the opportunity to have feedback on their pitches if they were unsuccessful as well. And it's just heartbreaking, to be honest, because a lot of these stories are excellent, but it's anything, it's it not fitting the theme, or and you almost, sometimes with an anthology, I think you don't really know the theme until you have all of the submissions there, and you can see the book, you can see the forest as opposed to the individual trees.
The thing I tried to tell people when we rejected them, or just as a sort of general statement to anyone that submitted and didn't get into the book, is you could have been the second best person that submitted, but if your idea was similar to the first best person in the book, we can't have you both. That's the reality of putting an anthology together, is that you don't want to have too many stories that hit the same beats or have the same style. There are a lot of reasons that someone might not get into an anthology. It's not always about talent. In fact, it's very rarely about talent.
And sometimes, for Come Together in particular, it was setting a bit. There's only so many times you can watch people make out in a bedroom. So I'm just like, all right, let's. So we've got this one's an airport. This one, because we got a lot of stories which were people meeting, long distance relationship and seeing each other for the first time, which is a truly beautiful story, and especially now it's a hard story. So I'm fresh off dropping a housemate off to the airport because their visa ran out today. But there's only so many of those stories you can have in.
But the one that we ran into a lot was merperson stories about river deities and river creatures and sea creatures. For some reason, that was the zeitgeist when we were putting the book together. So it was actually H. Preo and Dante Luis, who you mentioned earlier. Their story, I think, is the river god story that made
the river god one.
At which point, everyone else who had a river story.
Yeah, we had a bunch of mermaid stories too, and then we just
people love mermaids.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, mermaids, sea amphibious creatures, they are liminal beings between land and water, between mammalian and fish or amphibious. So it makes sense. A lot of people feel between. A lot of people feel like they want to belong to multiple worlds, or that they embody multiple worlds. And there's also so much diversity within the life. I mean, the deeper you go, the stranger and more alien and extraterrestrial the forms seem to be. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely one of those sea creatures. So it's actually really exciting to me that you were turning away so many sea creatures and river deities. I'm like, oh my God, my kin, they're out there. Where are you? Find
if someone
me.
wants to do a queer anthology of mer stories,
hit me up.
Talent is there. The idea is there.
I can't wait.
I was going to say,
that's an interesting take to have so many people who are interested in the mer and the sea creatures. I wouldn't say it's the opposite, but I get excited when I see those lesser known animals and creatures, such as selkies, or just ghosts and things that are native to people's culture. I get so excited when I can find them. I'm like, oh, so many people don't know about these. This is going to be a good one.
Oh, same. As a big mythology nerd, I feel the same. Absolutely. I think that's what was also cool about the Sylvan one, because I saw so many artists coming up with their own creatures. They everyone had the concept of my story must connect to the forest. How many different ways can we engage with the forest? So in that case, it was one setting, and all the different ways to engage with it, and that was really exciting to see.
Yeah, that was definitely a theme. Forest, as you say, as a liminal space, the forest proves to be so fascinating for creators, and apparently for queer creators especially, because we didn't even realize until we had finalized our collection of stories how many of them were set in the forest or at the edge of the forest. It's a space where, once upon a time queer people gravitated towards cities because we felt safe there. Now that we all live in cities where we feel safe, there is this magical allure of the forest as the place where maybe we can fall into self-discovery, where we can, explore freedom that we don't necessarily feel we have. There's a lot to unpack, and I haven't managed to unpack it all. But as a theme, it really resonated and struck me.
I would say once upon a time we sought safety in the forest. I think about witch covens and even Hideaway Hermitage, where queer people flocked and hid, under the eye, and the ceremonies that happened late into the night in the deepest, darkest part of the forest, where we hid our queerness. So it feels like maybe a sort of ancestral return to the primordial.
Because it's some really awesome insight. Sorry.
How going to myth or legend and creating our own stories is creating a lot of queer history is lost, and inserting our perception of queer narratives into histories or stories or legends is one way of just making a place for ourselves in the world. Because there's an interesting thing that happens, if you write a story about an elf, people start telling you what elves do, or the types of elves that there are. Someone knows research in-depth elves. And it's just so nice that you can take some of this stuff and throw away what you've decided you do and do it from a new angle. One of the webcomics that I published on my own is one called Minority Monsters, and it's literally doing that. One of the most popular characters from it is an asexual succubus, which just plays with the fact that you can be what you want to be. It doesn't matter so much what you started as, you get to decide. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's quite interesting things that are going on here. I love that this is bringing up, getting to see themes and trends and now analyzing whether or not, does this have to do with our queerness? How can this connect? For the judges, hearing about that editorial process, how much of your process feels like it kind of reflects that similar editorial process that anthology editors have to go through? And then as you were reading the anthologies that were submitted, what other types of themes were really prevalent in the works that came through this year?
I would say self-discovery is always a great thing to see. I think when you look at the characters and what they kind of go through, as you think about erotica or you think about anything in that realm, it is a self-discovery. It is something where you're challenging or thinking about, do I like this? Do I want to like this? I think about the queer world, especially for men, how we kind of come into this, a lot of us don't really have any idea how everything goes. I know for myself, growing up in the South, I had no idea what that looks like, what it even means in terms of all gay something. But when you think about erotica, you think about it's a whole different type of thing. And I think that when I'm reading these stories, I like the fact that it is that discovery of what you like, what you think you didn't like, and getting out of the shadows when it comes to your sexuality and feelings and emotions and desires. So I love stuff like that because, for a lot of us, we're still battling with, these feelings and desires and what we like, and do we want to wear a harness? What is a harness? Like all these things. So, I love the self-discovery piece. I love that feeling when I'm reading.
I have a question for the judges. Or it might be more of a general thing for the Prism Awards. Are you getting more anthology submissions than you used to? Like, are anthologies happening more now that Kickstarter's sort of a big thing? Or are we getting less? Like, I'm winding up an anthology book at the moment, and it has been a hell of a year for artists and everyone, and just trying to get things sorted and things. Do you think next year you might have a lot less anthologies because of what's happened? Did you have more this year? What's like the level of submissions?
So maybe I can jump in from the ether and help out with that question, because I think most of our committee this year is either entirely new, which we're really excited about, or new to this category. And in the 4 years that we've been doing this now, anthology is the category that gets the least number of submissions, partly because, as you both know, it takes a lot of effort to make an anthology. There's a lot of things to coordinate to make that happen. They're fairly massive undertaking. I do feel like over the years we've seen, so we have less than 10 anthologies that are usually submitted. But over the years, we usually get one or two more submissions in anthology each year. And that, I don't know if that has to do with how many anthologies are being created, as opposed to more people finding out about the awards, because the awards are self-submitted. So yeah, that's an interesting, curious question that we don't quite have the information to answer, and we'll see next year. I mean, people may be having massive amounts of time, to work on these as a pet project kind of thing, outside of it being a publisher thing. So we may see more we may see more independently created anthologies. Or it may be that the emotional toll has just been overwhelming. We'll find out the next year, and around usually somewhere January, February through March is when our submissions are. So we'll be excited to find that out. We do have a question from our audience members asking, do you remember what your first experience with anthologies was like, and how have your thoughts or approach changed since that first anthology? So for the creators putting that together, for judges, maybe your first experience reading anthology, to more especially this particular instance, having to analyze and critically think while you're judging them.
Yeah, I want to say, to your question that you just asked, I'm kind of curious about what sort of anthologies might come out of this quarantine time, because I feel like it could be a really intimate form of connection without being like in person with each other. So I'm hoping that something is being like gestated in this time for that. I think that could be really beautiful. I know that when I'm curating an event, for example, I like to bring in as many artists as possible to put into the space, because I feel like it just like generates more energy and gets the word out more, and you can bring in so many more people. But in this case, it could be like an anthology could be like an embodiment of a party, which like we can't have right now. So it's like the party is this book. I know I have a little crew of top folks, and we all write very strange smut together. And we're working on something together, and that's been a really cool connection, that knowing that we're coming together in this book. So I hope there's more anthologies next year. I hope that that doesn't like dwindle out, because it feels like a very tangible form of connection we can have right now. But as far as like my relationship to anthologies, I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and so I didn't have a lot of money for comic books growing up. But I would save up my money for anthologies, because the kind of most bang for my buck kind of thing, I could read as many artists and as many stories as I could in like one book. So I think I have a kind of a kinship to anthologies, because they were most of my collection growing up.
I think my connection to anthologies was I might have come across my first one accidentally, and I might have just loved the cover art and bought it or got it from the library. And reading it, what it did for me was it showed me that you can, one, have multiple stories in one book, and two, it was just very eye-opening to how you can tell a short story and it still be good. Because before that, I always, thought you had to stretch it out, stretch the story out, make it as long as possible. But when I saw all these different short stories and they had come to a conclusion in their own, and they held their own, that was really something I took in as far as my own writing, like learning how to make shorter stories that still have an impact, even if it's only 10 pages compared to thinking I need to do 50 pages to make it count. So I think that's what really pushed me to be a better writer and just dive deeper into being open to different genres.
I will say that for me as a kid, books were always the first, kind of introduction for those types of, for horror stories. I love scary things. You can scare me with anything you got. I love it. I think about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. That was something I grew up with. It was banned where I was from, but we were able to get it anyway. But that kind of opened my eyes to the different styles of storytelling from different parts of the world. But when it came to queer things, it was, I'm kind of a little embarrassed to say it, but it was one called Man Meat. It had a series for many, many years. It was erotica, but it was different stories by artists that are still in the game. But it was different stories where it was mer people, where it was, in space, or just the regular somebody at the gas station. It was those types of stories that kind of opened the doors, not only to queer life or to gay life, but just kind of how people chose these types of stories. And how it could be very, dirty, and how it could be kind of tasteful dirty, and what have you. There's so many different things. So from Scary Stories to the Dark all the way up to Wendy, really got into great stories. Yeah, different stories, different types of stories from different people all over.
My first anthology that I read was actually the Iron Circus Smut Peddlers, if you're familiar with them. And to be honest, just wow, they've just paved the way for just anthologies and ways that those work in general. And one of the things about it is talking a little bit about narrative with it. One of the reasons, like erotica, you were talking about the stories, Viktor, in it, is that especially when you're dealing with marginalized people, having them in comics where they're stories as opposed to one-up, pin-up images gives them a character, and it takes away some of that objectification aspect or sexualization, maybe, depends on the comic, but by telling the stories behind the people involved with it, it feels like that's the way you can avoid those. And that's something, going back to that point, that seeing Smut Peddler do that and how it could be done, that was really inspiring, and probably why erotica is the way I've done.
I would say, for my first experiences with anthologies, anthology is actually a very sort of natural form in the UK, because a lot of our comic growing up, the Beano, the Dandy, 2000 AD, kids grow up with anthology in the UK. So it's a much more sort of natural format than it is in some other markets. but it's also the sort of the preeminent format, I think, for a lot of independent comics, for a lot of the stuff that I would see at festivals and conventions, places like TCAF here in Toronto. You would see people like Protman, Joe McGill, Spray Monster, Tanika Stotts, like Kel McDonald. Year after year, these are the people who are giving a platform through their anthology work with so many creators. It's become one of the primary ways that we expand both the creative platform and we expand the audiences.
And that's great. That's just right on the nose for the last question we have from our audience that we can fit in today. So as you're wrapping up, if everyone can share where we can become your next biggest fan, where we can follow you and find out all the juicy details about all the amazing things you put out in the world, please go ahead and say that. But also, if you can touch on sort of that direction it was going. The final question was, do you think anthologies succeed in helping readers expand their reading palette, helping us read about the experiences of people that don't look like us, or for those of us who aren't usually represented, seeing the breadth of representation within a single form or category? I know that's a big question to end on, but try to answer as succinctly as you can. And we did go over a little bit because we started a little late, but we'll wrap up now. And thank you again so much to everybody who's been on this panel. Thank you.
Maybe we can go in order to wrap it up. Yeah, definitely, absolutely a diversity of narratives. I think for me personally, it introduced me to a diversity of styles, all the different ways that I could make art, because I think if you grow up only looking at one form of art, or you get told by like your Eurocentric and white supremacist school that this art is valuable and this art isn't, and then you start reading independent comics and you see all these different styles and all these different forms, you're like, wait a minute, people enjoy this? People want to engage with this? My little scribbles mean something, they matter. My like strange forms, they matter. So I think that's really important, and anthologies can help us to colonize the way that we engage with styles of art and the types of comics even that we hold as more important than others, and the types of stories we hold more important than others. I'm really grateful to anthologies for that. You can find me mostly on Instagram. I got the Holy Hawk Moth. It's probably backwards, but it's just hard to say. Okay, great. I was a little weird. Yeah, I mostly use Instagram. I'm a really slow poster because fuck capitalism and fuck the algorithm, but I always post something hella long, so you just have to wait and you'll get some juicy, I promise. Yeah, and you can mostly find me there and love to interact with people there. I'm working on a bunch of projects right now. So like, especially right now is a good time to like slide and like see what I'm doing. It's about to pop off. So welcome. I'd be so excited to meet you. Introduce yourself. If you saw me on this panel, I'd love to meet you. Thank you so much.
I want to say that I definitely agree. I know so many people who they don't read in the sense of chapter books and things like that, but they would love to be a part of anthology to just read through them. Like that will draw them in, whereas trying to read a regular standard format book will not. So I definitely feel like there is so much room to grow and so many more people to bring into this that I definitely see it being a big thing in the coming years. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under Bear by Day. I just reopened my Instagram, so there's not much on it. I think I have like 16 followers, so it's pretty quiet. Mostly active on Twitter. Feel free to connect. Feel free to ask any questions.
All right, I pretty much agree with what everybody said. So I will say that, as long as anthologies continue to challenge, continue to take us on journeys, I think it will always be popular. So that's something that I'm always hoping to see, and I'm always really looking forward to every year. You can find me on Twitter. I am Wonderman with 2 N's live. I talk a lot about politics, so I apologize now. But I also talk about comics, and I also talk about many different things that happen, especially the 80s, because I'm an 80s kid. Right now, I am working on a couple of things. I finished one of my graphic novels, and it's been edited by Steam. for that help. So, Strangelore was my first graphic novel. This is my second, and it's a follow-up to Strangelore. And I'm also working on a YA novel that is focusing on Black queer witches, the warlocks. I even changed the name, so they're not even called witches and warlocks. They're called Manju. And it's called Sons of Midnight and Shade, and I'm very excited for it. It's a lot of writing. I just hit over 50,000 words 2 days ago, but we still gotta keep going. So that's me, and again, you can find me on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. His name is Viktor. I do a lot of posts of myself, but also other things.
So yeah, to answer the question, I think we find it very easy in comics to find a thing we love and just stick in that channel. And that's the great thing about anthologies is, go to an anthology that features a creator that you love, or a style, or a genre that you love. Use that as a jumping off point to find other people, because that's what it's about. It's it takes a community to build these things, and that's the strength of anthologies, and we need to support that. You can find me on Twitter at Wheeler. That's my surname, Waeeler. Shoutout is on Twitter at ShoutoutComic. I'm going to hold it up again. And the website, if you want to pick up a copy, is shoutoutanthology.com. You might be able to order through your local comic store as well. The strength and weakness of Kickstarter-supported books is that anyone can publish a book, but getting distribution is always going to be a nightmare. So please support anthologies. You can't reach through.
Hire another panel in itself, distribution for indie presses, yes. To answer the question thing going in, I think it's so interesting for publishers like Toronto Comics to do different anthologies of different subjects, and Kickstarter does a thing now where if they release a new Kickstarter, all of the people who backed previous ones from that person gets binged, like, oh, maybe you should check out this comic. So I'll be really interested. I hope that fan bases that I built up over the years, I can do anthologies. That means that each time one would have a look. So you can find my work on Twitter, Kimpton. My website is discordcomics.com, which, not like the chat thing, I've been sitting on that URL for over a decade now. And my next anthology, I'm currently in the middle of gathering together one called Ambrosia, which is a erotica again. It's a trans-masculine and non-binary. And we're currently accepting submissions for the sibling anthology to that, Nectar, which is trans femme and non-binary comics as well. So really looking forward to, this is something that I really hope to bring out more of those in years to come, because, hopefully people are going to like what they read.
Awesome. Thank you again to all of our program participants for our very first panel today. And hopefully those of you that have a Discord will join us on the Discord server after the panel. I think there's a few people who are excited to hear your social media, where they can follow you again. So please post those on Discord, and you have a welcome audience excited to intermingle with you. And we will take a quick break, and when we come back, we will start our next and last panel before the awards. This is our small to mid-size press panel. So we'll be right back in about 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Hang in there.